Hi, I'm Ava Murphy, and this is my dad, Taylor Murphy, and today I will be interviewing him on the topic of 9/11. So, Dad, take me back to the day, September 11, 2001. Where were you, and what do you remember from that day?
I remember like it was yesterday actually, because I woke up, I was living in San Francisco, I was 28 years old, and my phone rang at about 5:50, something like that, our time, which was obviously early. And it was my brother, your Uncle Sean, and he worked New York hours even though he was in San Francisco. And first thing he said is, "You're not in New York, are you?" Because I had to go to New York for work somewhat often. And he said, "Dude, turn on the TV." So we turned on the TV, and literally without even changing the channel, the first thing that I saw was the two towers, and I think it was CNN, and seeing smoke coming out of the North Tower. So I think, like most of us, we didn't really know what we were looking at. And I made the assumption, like I think most of us did in those first few minutes when it was just the North Tower, that a helicopter or a small plane accidentally crashed into the building. And I remember your mom was there with me, and we both looked at each other as if like it was something else that was big that happened, but we certainly didn't know the gravity of what was going on. And so, this was back before iPhones, and I think we both started calling a couple of people that we knew in Manhattan just to see what the deal was. And of course, none of the calls were going through, and I was literally standing there watching TV. I had a television on top of my dresser when the second plane came in and live hit the South Tower. So I just remember being like shocked and unclear about what was going on, but nothing about that initial 15 minutes or 20 minutes suggested that we were in danger. It was just, oh my God, what's going on? But I never thought we are under attack. I thought, oh my God, two planes just crashed into buildings.
So, how were those first few days after the day? Like, how did you feel about those?
Well, that same day, once we did connect with a couple of friends to make sure that everybody was okay, your Uncle Sean insisted on keeping the plan, which was meeting at North Beach that night as a family because he was proposing to Courtney. And I remember thinking that was a bad idea. I didn't really feel great about going into San Francisco. But at the same time, Sean is Sean, and he wasn't going to let his plans be altered. I just thought, wow, that's kind of funny. Do you really want to associate the day that you get on your knee and propose to your to-be wife always linked to 9/11? But again, at that point, that first day, I don't think anybody really knew what exactly was going on. So what was my feeling? I think it was shock. And then how was that first few days? It was just trying to piece together what the media was telling us. And within a couple of days of grounding all of the airplanes, President Bush and Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell and Donald Rumsfeld and Cheney, all the guys, we felt like we were probably in good hands. We had the right people addressing what was going on, but my memory doesn't suggest that we knew definitively anything about Al-Qaeda, anything about Osama bin Laden, but it was pretty apparent within a couple of days that it was a terrorist attack.
Okay, so next question. How did that affect you, like on a personal level, and like, do you remember your conversations with family or friends?
Yeah, the things that stand out to me when you mentioned this assignment was, number one, the day of going into work in San Francisco, and that kind of shows you how naive we all still were. We never thought for a second that San Francisco, 3,000 miles away from Manhattan, was a target. But I remember it was all we talked about. It was all everybody talked about. And a good college roommate of mine, Brian Racanelli, gave me kind of a play-by-play of what happened. He was there and explaining running down and seeing all of the firemen go up the stairs and run into the blaze while everybody else was running out, and just describing the scene as something like out of a zombie movie where there was smoke in the streets and papers everywhere, and saying that that these laundromats were like almost in slow motion, giving people that were running sheets and pillowcases so they could cover their faces and breathe. And then him describing like turning a corner and not seeing anything and running square into a fire hydrant and tearing his knee open, but knowing then that there was going to be no room for him at any kind of hospital. So he just went back to his apartment and took care of it. But that was the initial few days. You know, we knew that it wasn't an accident. We knew that we were under attack. Again, I don't think anybody at my age or in my social group knew anything about Osama bin Laden. It was the first time we'd ever heard his name and had no idea what Al-Qaeda was. I think we assumed that it was something on the tail end of like the Gulf War, you know, or something that happened with Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq. We didn't know that it was this militant Islamic group that hated America. And I also didn't piece together, you know, that it was the towers and then they were headed towards the Pentagon, and that they hit the Pentagon, and that all the people on flight, I think 93 United, you know, when the guys, literally the passengers, stormed because their phones were telling them what was going on in real time, and like heroes, attacking them in the cockpit and causing that fourth plane to crash in Pennsylvania. So it was scary times. I didn't know until a week or two in that they targeted the towers specifically because they were trying to like cripple our financial institutions. I didn't know the companies that were in the towers. So we were all just kind of watching a lot of news every day. This was like right early internet. So it was a lot of word of mouth and a lot of CNN and Fox and trying to digest what was going on.
So, Dad, you travel a lot to big cities for work. Like, how often do you still think of 9/11?
Strangely enough, I mean, it's been, 25 years, almost 23, 24 years. I don't think about it, obviously, on a daily basis, but I am much more aware. I think general awareness. When I travel, when I get on an airplane, I know what aisle seat I'm sitting in. I know where the exit is relative to my seat. Another thing that I remember, and I still do it to a degree, is when I'm in a new building in Chicago, LA, New York, Boston, is I find myself getting off the elevator and kind of noticing where the stairs are, because I would have never thought of my seat on an airplane relative to the exit. I never would have thought of how to quickly get out of a building if, God forbid, something like that ever happened again. So I'm much more aware. And then for sure, when I'm in big cities, if I hear an airplane that seems low, or if you see an airplane and you look up and it looks bigger than it should look, it definitely triggers something to where I do think about it.
So now it's been around 25 years. Why do you think that there's still so many documentaries and books about 9/11, and like how has that changed your perspective?
Yeah, we've watched quite a few of these documentaries. I think to this day, especially for your generation that wasn't here, you think of all of the events. I think of the events that I lived through, and 9/11 was kind of like the JFK assassination or the John Lennon assassination of our parents. It's the thing that you remember exactly where you were. I saw the Challenger explode in 3rd or 4th grade. I was in college when the 91 fires in Oakland evacuated my parents. I was here during the 89 earthquake. We were all here for the O.J. Simpson trial and Princess Diana being assassinated. There were all of these things, but nothing was an attack on America. So I think that it was and is still so relevant today, because New York City, which historically has a stereotype that's well-deserved for being a pretty aggressive city, like the people there can be kind of abrasive, you know, New Yorkers. But seeing how quickly they all banded together, and it didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat, if they were Catholic or Jewish, or black or white, it didn't matter. Everybody kind of united, and it's a bummer that it takes something like a national tragedy to make Americans come together. And then, you know, there were weeks and weeks of this togetherness and united New Yorkers and everyone kind of banding around New York. But then, like most things, slowly but surely, people kind of went back to the way they lived their lives, which is human nature, where we think about our immediate needs, our immediate stress and anxiety, and taking care of our immediate friends and family. We don't think about people in other cities or states or countries for sure. So yeah, it hasn't really changed my perspective day to day, but it definitely makes me think that the reason it was such a big deal was because we were attacked, and up to that point, we had always gone to war to help other countries, to help other countries, and this was a case of them blatantly targeting the United States on our soil. Other than the Oklahoma City bombing, in my lifetime, we had never seen anything even close to the scale of losing 3,000 people. And I think the reason that's relevant also is that everybody knows somebody that was touched by 9/11. Everybody had a friend or a loved one that was either there or knew somebody that was there. And so it's personal.
Okay, and lastly, like, what do I need to know that I haven't asked you?
So it's a little, I always talk about glass half full with you and being optimistic and being hopeful, but the way our current government is structured and what's going on even today with Ukraine and with Russia and with China, with all these tariffs, whether you voted for Donald Trump or you didn't vote for Donald Trump, I think our country is more divided than it's ever been in my lifetime. And God forbid something like this happens again. I feel like we have a lot of allies that might be a little slower to come help us because of the way we have operated as a democracy the last year for sure. Like I mentioned earlier, even at 28 years old, I didn't think that Bush was the smartest guy in the world, but I knew that he surrounded himself with a cabinet of people that were veterans, intelligent, had proven that they were the right people to protect us and to do something and take action to keep us safe and to make us feel safe, which are two different things. Today, I'm not so sure that if something like that happened again, that we have the right people to unite us if we are already so divided right now before something like that were to happen. So it's a little pessimistic. It's a little of a negative way of thinking about things, but it is something to think about, and it's a little concerning. Like, do we have the right people to make us feel safe as Americans?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I
You're
learned a
welcome.
lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.